Welcome to the Unstressed Exec, the podcast where we dive deep into the real conversations that help you lead, love, and live with greater clarity, courage, and calm. I'm your host, Dr. George Vergolias, executive coach and clinical forensic psychologist, and I help high-achieving professionals navigate life transitions, resolve conflict with confidence, and build unshakable psychological resilience. So if you're ready to lead with purpose, master conflict with grace, and become more emotionally agile under pressure, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Welcome back to the Unstressed Exec, where we talk about how to perform, lead, and live with clarity, calm, and confidence, even when life feels like it's coming apart at the seams. I'm your host, Dr. George Vergolias, forensic psychologist, executive and resilience coach, and someone who has spent over 2 decades helping people navigate interpersonal conflict, both in daily and high-stakes settings. Before we dive in, just a quick note. If you're finding value in these episodes or in my social media content and want to go a bit deeper, check out my workbook, The Conflict Whisperer, From Triggered to Transformed, a no-bullshit guide to managing conflict in every relationship. It's packed with real-world strategies, over 75 reflection exercises, and neuroscience-backed tools to help you navigate conflict without losing your cool, at work, at home, or in moments of personal crisis. Whether you're going through a breakup, managing tension with a partner, or leading under pressure, this workbook gives you a practical roadmap to turn conflict into clarity. You can grab a copy now on Amazon. I'll leave a link in the show notes, or you can search on Amazon for The Conflict Whisperer, From Triggered to Transformed. All right, back to our broadcast. Today we're tackling a topic that almost everyone struggles with, but very few people actually name. And it's the burnout that comes from avoiding conflict. Not the burnout from long hours or unrealistic workloads. We all are familiar with that. This is a quieter kind of burnout. The kind that builds slowly when you swallow frustration, sidestep conversations, or pretend things don't bother you when they really do. And it all begins with us developing awareness for the illusion of peace. We often equate peace with the absence of conflict. But in my 20 plus years working with executives, physicians, attorneys, and high performers of all kinds, I've seen this pattern over and over. People who appear calm and composed on the surface, but are internally exhausted. What these people say are things like, I just don't want to make it worse. It's not worth the argument. It's not worth dying on that hill. I'm too tired for another confrontation. All of these are common statements that people in this level of burnout experience. And at first, that strategy seems to work. You duck your head under the sand. You dodge a fight. You keep things smooth. You keep things peaceful or amicable. You maintain control. But beneath that polished calm, there's a quiet erosion happening. Because unspoken truth doesn't disappear. It just burrows deeper into the body. Your nervous system knows there's unresolved tension, even when your mouth stays shut. In my workbook, The Conflict Whisperer, I call this the silent burnout. It's a psychological pattern where the avoidance of conflict actually becomes its own form of chronic stress. And when this becomes your default mechanism for managing that stress, it leads to kind of a cancerous underlying burnout that can be hard to detect until it builds over time. It's like running an emotional background app that's always on, draining your battery without you realizing it. So once you become aware of that and you become aware of the illusion of peace, the next thing, it's important to understand the psychology of avoidance. So let's unpack what's happening here. Avoidance is almost never about laziness or apathy. We often put those titles or those labels on people in these situations, but it's really not about that. It's a learned survival strategy. Somewhere along the way, often in childhood, we internalize that conflict equals danger. Maybe you grew up in a family where arguments got loud or violent, or were very eruptive. Maybe your parents stonewalled and gave each other the silent treatment for days. Or maybe expressing your needs was met with shame or punishment. It doesn't matter what you grew up in. Each of those gives a message about conflict, that it is bad, that it is dangerous. Fast forward to adulthood, and your nervous system still runs that same playbook. It still runs on that same default mode emotionally. You avoid confrontation because it feels unsafe, not because you lack courage. In trauma psychology, we call this the fawn response, a close cousin to fighting, flighting, or freezing. The fawn response is about appeasing to stay safe, getting along so that you can feel psychologically, emotionally, and in some cases, physically safe. You prioritize harmony, connection, and others' emotions above your own, even at the cost of your authenticity. And that's where the real damage comes in over time. This creates a double bind. You crave peace, but the way you pursue it, by silencing yourself, actually creates inner chaos. In a way, you're drinking a poison and not exactly hoping the other person dies, but you're drinking a poison thinking, all right, this is going to make the relationship better or create peace. But it's eroding away you internally. And the result of all of this, emotional dissonance. You're smiling externally while burning out internally. I've seen this time and again in my executive and life and resilience coaching practice. And I've especially seen this in leaders, the ones everyone calls steady, level-headed, the glue of the team. Those labels sound flattering, but they often mask a person who's absorbing everyone else's emotional load while neglecting their own boundaries. And that's not leadership. That is emotional martyrdom, and it doesn't last. It cannot scale in time or in growth. And eventually those leaders move on, and that leaves a vacuous hole in the organization. So once we understand that, we then need to understand the burnout connection and how that comes together. And here's where it gets fascinating and also troubling. When you avoid conflict, your nervous system doesn't actually relax. It stays in a low-grade stress response because it's ready, it's preparing, it's anticipating. Because the issue hasn't been resolved, it's simply been brushed under the carpet. Research on emotional suppression shows that when you inhibit your natural impulses, like wanting to speak up or express anger or set a boundary, your brain still activates the stress response. Heart rate increases, cortisol spikes, muscle tension rises. You have a push of adrenaline sometimes. You can get distracted in your focus. All of these things come to the fore. But because you never release that energy through expression, your body can't compete the stress cycle. It can't compete with the stress cycle, and it can't complete the stress cycle either. It stays on. It's always on guard. It's always waiting for the next attack, the next blow up, because it knows, that you haven't really resolved it. You've just brushed it away for the time being. Think about it like holding your breath emotionally. You can do it for a while, but eventually it costs you. Over time, this chronic low-level activation leads to what psychologists call allostatic load. It's a big word, allostatic load. The cumulative wear and tear on the body from unrelieved stress. You might not even connect it to avoidance, but it can show up as things such as persistent fatigue, even after rest. You've slept 8, 9, 10 hours, but you wake up and you still feel mentally exhausted. Irritability or cynicism at work, often to benign interactions, things that normally should not have upset you, but you become irritable or cynical. Loss of motivation or passion, difficulty getting to bed, or what some call revenge sleeping or revenge activity when you go to bed, where you want to stay up late watching Netflix or doom scrolling on social media. Not so much that you really want to do that, but you want to avoid going to bed because going to bed means you're going to wake up tomorrow and have to face the workplace and the conflicts that are going on. And then physically, it manifests as headaches, back tension, or even digestive issues. I once coached a senior executive, I'm just going to call her Laura, who came to me completely depleted. She was working 60-hour weeks. She was leading a large team and considered the emotional stabilizer of her company. So she had a big load, kind of emotional heaviness weighing over her. And on paper, her burnout looked like overwork. That was it. You're working too much. You need to delegate more. You need more resources. But when we dove in and really unpacked it, it wasn't the hours that drained her. It was constantly managing other people's emotions and never voicing her own frustration. I recall a number of years ago hearing a great phrase that said this: you're not burned out because you're doing too much. You're burned out because you're not doing enough of what makes you come alive. Think about the last time that you were very busy, but working on something exciting. Maybe it was a wedding planning. Maybe it was a honeymoon. Maybe it was a graduation of your senior in high school. Maybe it was planning your child going to college. It could be a number of things, right? Maybe it was a retirement party. And that added a big to do load on your week, on your task list. It added more for you to do. You had to work more hours to get those things done, but you were energized. You were excited. You didn't feel burned out because it was something that was energizing you. Burnout isn't just about the quantity of hours. It's also about the quality and the passion and the motivation that we're bringing to the work. In this instance with Laura, she thought she was preserving peace by constantly managing other people's emotions over her own frustration, but she was suppressing herself into exhaustion. Within 3 months of learning to address issues early and directly, and do it with clarity and composure, what we did is we helped her energy come back. Her migraines decreased and her team respected her more, not less. And the reason is because she was more present and she was more able to be there for them. That's the paradox of avoidance. The very behavior meant to preserve peace, the avoidance, is actually what destroys it, both internally and then eventually relationally. So you can't hide from this. This is something we have to deal with. And just brushing it away doesn't really deal. It's like a volcano eventually. That lava is going to bubble up to the surface again. And then you have to deal with it. And usually the consequences are bigger at that point. A technique or a tool to help deal with this is what I call the 3-minute micro confrontation method. So how do we start reversing the pattern? That's the key here, right? Without turning every interaction into a confrontation, because that's the flip side. We don't want to do that, right? We don't want to make mountains out of molehills. So one of the simplest and most effective techniques I teach in the Conflict Whisperer is what I call the 3-minute micro confrontation method. The goal isn't to win or dominate. It's to prevent small issues from metastasizing and growing into resentment. The goal, I'll say it a different way. The goal of arguing or conflict management is not to win. The goal is to unpack the disagreement so you can move towards a healthy resolution where both parties can move forward. All right, here's how it works. Number one, or step one, name the tension early. Most people wait too long. By the time they speak up, the conversation is loaded with emotion. It's loaded with baggage from prior arguments, prior discussions. Other things are thrown into the mix, and now you're not even staying on one topic. So instead, catch it when the emotional charge is still low and manageable. You might say something like this: "Hey, I noticed there was some tension in that meeting. Can we chat about it? Or can we do a debrief?" That single sentence interrupts avoidance. It signals openness, not attack. It signals readiness to engage in a mutually beneficial dialogue. And it also signals a little bit of vulnerability and awareness, right? You're openly aware that, hey, this didn't seem right. Let's touch base on that. Step two, express your emotion, not your accusation. The moment you blame, the other person's defenses go up. So instead of "you never listened," you might say something like, "When I was sharing this a minute ago, I felt like my perspective wasn't landing. I'd love to make sure we're aligned. Or I'd love to have another opportunity to express where I'm coming from." This subtle shift turns conflict into collaboration, and it works because you're removing the ego in the other person. And you're not arguing with them anymore. You're arguing the argument. That's another thing I talk about in my workbook. Argue with the argument. So instead of saying, "Hey, Steve, this is why you're wrong," that pulls in Steve's ego. Now Steve has to defend himself because he is wrong as an entire human being. That is a recipe for defensiveness. Instead of saying that, "Hey, Steve, you're wrong," what I want to say is, "Hey, Steve, here's my issue with that perspective." Or here's where that opinion doesn't make sense to me. Notice I'm switching the focus onto the argument or to the opinion, not to Steve himself, right? And that subtle shift really turns everything into more of a collaborative mode, and it eliminates the ego. Step three, make a request, but don't demand. So end with a forward moving ask, such as, can we try this next time? Or can we try a different approach next time? And you could fill that in with X, whatever the resolution would be. Can we try X next time? Or how do you see it? How do you see this working better next time? So if I'm in the middle of a conflict and we started shouting, I might say something like, hey, next time when we have a disagreement, can we take it offline so the whole team doesn't see us disagreeing? Or can we take it offline to resolve our disagreement first before we bring it back to the team? These conversations can literally take under 3 minutes, but they prevent weeks of silent resentment and disconnect. And then there's other subtle ways in which collaboration and working together also suffers if these things are not dealt with directly. People are not willing to share as much, people are not as open. It really creates weeks of difficulty when you don't address this head on. I call them micro confrontations because they're small and frequent doses of honesty that keep the relation system healthy. It's like regular exercise instead of surgery. Because if you wait too long to fix a medical problem, it costs a lot more and you need a lot more serious intervention. Whereas if you hit it early, you're going to have less of a serious intervention. Same with conflict management. And here's the beauty. Once you practice this regularly, your nervous system adjusts. It recalibrates. You begin to associate honesty with safety, not danger. You are slowly unlearning the patterns that you learned as childhood that we talked about earlier. That emotionality, whether it's too much or too little, is dangerous. As adults, we can't live in the childhood. We have to take accountability to retool and recalibrate our nervous system. And this begins to do that. And over time, it actually rewires your emotional baseline from anxious appeasement to grounded authenticity. And that's the sweet spot. That's where you want to be. So now let me kind of pivot slightly and bring this up to maybe a 20 to 30,000 foot perspective and talk about productive discomfort as leadership currency. Because when leaders are in a discomforting place, but it's a productive place, that's where real movement and growth can happen. So basically, we're going to zoom out a bit. In leadership and in life, your ability to tolerate productive discomfort is directly proportional to your growth. I'm going to read that again. Your ability to tolerate productive discomfort is directly proportional to your growth. Leaders who avoid hard conversations end up surrounded by compliance, not commitment. Teams tiptoe around issues, innovation suffers, collaboration decreases, and eventually trust erodes quietly. It just dies away. In contrast, leaders who address issues early and head on with empathy and honesty and steadiness, they build cultures of psychological safety. People feel free to speak true without fear. They're open to being vulnerable, knowing that it's safe to do so. And only in vulnerability can we bring new ideas and innovative things to the table. The same applies in personal relationships. The strongest couples aren't those who never fight. They're the ones who repair quickly and respectfully after the fight. Another way to say that is the strongest couples are not those who never fight. It's those who use fighting as a productive way to learn and grow closer. Conflict is inevitable. Rupture is optional. That's what the Conflict Whisperer workbook is really about. Not eliminating tension, but mastering it, working through it in a way that is productive. And that's the focus of today's episode. True peace isn't the absence of conflict. Remember, it's the presence of emotional strength. So here's your challenge this week. Think of one small situation that you've been avoiding. Maybe it's a conversation with a colleague or a partner or even a family member. Use the 3-minute micro confrontation method that we discussed today. Speak early, stay calm, and stay curious. You'll be amazed how quickly suppressed tension transforms into clarity and respect. If today's conversation hit home and you're ready to take that next step from insight to action, go check out my workbook, The Conflict Whisperer, From Triggered to Transformed. This isn't fluff. It's practical, no BS guide designed to help you break the cycles of reactivity, build emotional strength, and navigate conflict with more confidence and less chaos. You'll get hands-on exercises, powerful frameworks, and mindset shifts that I use every day with clients in my coaching practice, from high-achieving executives to people just trying to hold their personal lives together. It's available now on Amazon, but I will drop a link in the show notes as well. As always, thank you for being here, for doing the work, and for choosing to be the calm in the storm. Now, a quick call to action. Insight without action changes nothing. If you're ready to turn awareness into movement and stress into strategy, coaching can be the catalyst. Coaching will change you. Reach out to set up a free consultation. You can find me at www.theunstressedexec.com or on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube as The Unstressed Exec. Let's create real momentum starting now. Until next time, I'm Dr. George Vergolias, The Unstressed Exec. Thanks for listening. See you soon. And remember, shift happens.